to 2021.
Mr. Mayor, I'll work from here if that's okay. So, Mr. Mayor, we're coming into budget preparation time, as you know, and what's very critical at this point in time is that council consider what it is that you want to see in our next 5-year financial plan, and that council give to me and staff direction on what you want to see us incorporate into a draft financial plan, 5-year financial plan, 2017 through 2021. So when I'm done here, Jake Martins, our deputy clerk, is going to walk you through a couple of methods by which we propose to engage the public, so that before you give direction to staff on a draft document, draft plan, you get input and direction, if you like, from the public. So Jake will walk us through that. Prior to that, I wanted to take my opportunity to influence you on direction that you give to me. So I've got a presentation, so you've seen a version of this prior. And again, this is my view on the road before the city, the organization of the city of Port Alberni, and in terms of our budget needs. I think I probably can't get this to work, but oh, I can. Was that me? Wow.
You have the power.
Yes, yeah, Brent is gone, sir. Hopefully the screens hold up. So the city financial is obligated to provide, to submit to the province 5-year financial plans. And the current financial plan that we're working within is 2016 through 2020. And the 2016 budget increase, as you know, as you sweated over, it was somewhere, I think, around 2.7% taxation increase or budget increase. And in that 5-year financial plan, there was 4 more years. And what we tended to do for a long time is focus on year 1, because that's the one that's right in front of us. But there's 4 more years in that plan. And so what I'm showing you here is the anticipated budget increases in the 4 years ahead of us. So the plan that we're working under right now, today, says that effective January 1st, 2017, we're going to increase our spending 17%. And then there's a small drop in 18, reasonably flat in 19, and a bigger increase in 2020 for an average of 5.6 per year. And I don't think that any of us in the room thought that we were going to increase our spending 17% next year. I think this is a good example of a 5-year financial plan that we adopted because we have to, because by law we have to submit a 5-year financial plan. But really it was a 12-month financial plan. With some considerations, if you like, that we're going to revisit. And we've been doing this for a while. And we've been pushing out projects, largely capital projects, out to the next year because we can't afford them in the first year. And so we push them out and we hope to get to them next year, and we push them out and we push them out. And we're building what's known as an infrastructure deficit. And this is something facing local governments across North America, is that infrastructure is aging. The cost to renew that infrastructure is beyond the capacity of governments. And so we slowly slip into a situation where we're patching. And we're patching and hoping they'll last a little longer, and hoping that some money is going to emerge from senior government or something like that. So, and I have to tell you, I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom. The sky is not falling. The city is in good situation financially. We're well managed. We have compared to other municipalities, I think we're on a good path, and our infrastructure is not crumbling today. But there is a need for us to invest in infrastructure renewal, so that at some point down the road, we don't start to fall into a situation where we can't get out of, where we can't afford to pay out of to renew that infrastructure. So the message on this slide is that although we adopt 5-year financial plans, I don't think that we're planning beyond 12 months. Year to year is what we've been doing. And there's 3 critical issues, I think, that face us. There's lots of issues facing this city and others, but the 3 critical ones, I think, for this community are that we've experienced a lack of growth. We've seen, and that's in tax base and population. We were a little over 20,000 people in 1980, I believe, and today we're 17,500. It feels busy, the community. There's a sense of optimism. It feels like we're growing, or we're gaining attention. We're trying to grow. I hope that we'll grow. But if you look backwards over the last 30, 35 years, we haven't grown. And that has been a problem for us. So we're relying on the same tax base to pay for cost increases that come inevitably. The second critical issue, I think, is that, as I mentioned earlier, we're not adequately funding infrastructure renewal. And as time goes by, we will see that become a bigger and bigger challenge for us. And the third one is we rely on an industrial tax base. That's not unusual in forest-based economies, and we've seen a number of communities have to adapt to a loss of that large forest industry tax base. There's no indication at this point, that we wouldn't enjoy going forward, in 2017, the kind of economy that we were used to. But that is a concern, that when a large part of your revenue comes from one source that is beyond our control to retain. I wanted to show you this slide, and the colors might not align very well, but it shows that based on census status, it's 1981. Top line is Nanaimo, and then we've got Campbell River, Courtenay, Parksville. Port Alberni's the heavy dark line running trend-wise opposite to the other communities, and Ucluelet at the bottom is basically flat. So what I'd like to show you with this is that other communities in our neighborhood are growing, and some of them have started significantly smaller than us in 1981 and are bigger than us. And we've not seen growth. We've wanted growth, we've courted growth, we've tried a lot of different things to grow, and yet we have not seen a growth in population. And I'll just buzz back to there. I have to say, everything I'm telling you is kind of general speaking, okay? So anybody could pick holes in a lot of the things I'm showing you. Some might say that, well, some of these cities have grown physically, they've expanded and taken in other areas, as we have. We've expanded and taken in other areas as well. Maybe not to the same extent of these ones, but the trend, I don't think is we can deny the trend, that some communities are growing, ours has not. So on that issue of lack of growth, it means that our economy doesn't grow from more people. So it might grow, but it doesn't grow. We're not putting up new businesses and having new customers that drive an economy. And population growth spurs and reflects a diverse economy. So without that growth that other communities rely on, we've been, the same taxpayers basically have been funding any cost increases that we experience. And a lot of our cost increases are inflationary. We haven't expanded largely the services that we provide. It's just maintaining those services. On the second issue identified, infrastructure spending, what we've seen in recent years is a reduction in our reserve funds. So we've been responding to our cost increases in part by spending the money from our reserves. And so that does a couple of things. When we reduce the money we have in the bank, it means that we don't have the same capacity to take advantage of grant money. So when we apply for grants from senior levels of government, they generally want us to come with a contribution of our own, sometimes 50%, sometimes 33%, sometimes 66%. But there's almost always an obligation for us to bring some money. And if we have healthy reserve funds, we can draw that money. So if we're applying for several $1 million and we have to bring $1 million of our own, we kind of need to have that money in the bank. Otherwise, we're either borrowing for our share or we're not able to be eligible for those grants. And so if you take that same action going forward, as we continue to, if we were continue to borrow and have few funds in reserves, we can get into a situation where we are not spending, we're not able to take advantage of grants. So then all the capital we do comes with 100% of our money, not leveraged by grants. So that's a slippery slope that we're on the top of, right? We're not at the bottom of that slope, but we're on our way. If we continue the way we're going, depleting our reserves and spending and using our borrowing power, we could find ourselves in a situation where we can't take advantage of grants, and that would not be good for us. And if you combine that with infrastructure needs that are emergency funding because something breaks, now we have to spend 100% of our dollars to do an emergency repair that could have been planned for otherwise. In terms of infrastructure, this shows the amount of property taxes that were allocated to capital projects. So we pulled out water and sewer. Those are separately funded. And this doesn't include grant funds. And it shows that in 2010, we reduced property taxes allocated to, or we had a low amount of property taxes allocated to capital projects. And my strong suspicion is that was because Catalyst didn't pay their taxes that year. So we diverted a number of funds. And then in 2011 and 12, it was up higher. And you can see that since 2011, there's been a fairly steady decline and flattened out in recent years, the money that we allocate from taxes, property taxes to capital. And obviously, we need to spend more than that. On the third issue, our reliance on industrial taxes, our exposure, if you like, is about 23% of our tax revenue. that we're reliant on our heavy industry taxpayers to provide, as well as our local economy is largely or heavily dependent on the forest economy, heavy industrial forest economy. So we still have, you know, a heavy reliance on forestry, sawmilling and the paper mill for our taxation, a large portion of our taxation revenue. We've done a lot of good work. We've reduced the amount significantly that we depend on industry for, and we're at 23%, we're lower than some other communities. But at 23%, we're still exposed to, if that economy was to fail or falter, that's a big chunk of our revenue that we rely on to provide services, day-to-day services that we might have to adjust to. And as that bullet says, some other communities have already crossed this bridge. They've seen, you know, their large industry disappear, and they've had to make adjustments. And I've bolded the bottom line that the impacts on heavy industry in our community are largely out of our control. Their viability is largely out of our control, and reducing, in my mind, reducing city taxes today on industry won't change the viability of those operations. So we are interested bystanders in that whole large-scale forestry economy. We're very interested because we rely on them, and but we're bystanders. We don't have any sway on what happens. So how did this situation evolve? And again, this is my view of it. I think that Port Alberni evolved, our economy and the organization of the city of Port Alberni evolved over time because the community has been used to large business underwriting city costs. And as I said, we've done a lot of work on moving some of those costs over to other taxpayers, largely residential. But still there's that sense of optimism and just faith that things will always be somewhat like they've been. And the last line is a little bit pointed. We might have had long-term planning. I'm sure we did long-term plan in the past, but we haven't followed those plans. So we need to adopt long-term plans and then stay the course and not get swayed on by projects that are attractive as they arise. So to that end, what is my recommendation for our best course of action? If a reduction in heavy industry occurs, we'll take emergency actions then. So that's if something bad happens, we're going to have to do what we have to do. But until then, we can wait until that may happen or may not happen, or we can wait until growth occurs, or we can take some long-term action starting now to correct our course, to reduce our reliance on, our operational reliance on industrial tax dollars for sure, and to free up some room to be able to start to fund some infrastructure renewal. So in the lighter colored font, this course of action takes strong leadership. This is not for the faint of heart. If we start to reduce our spending on services so that we can make room for some infrastructure renewal, you're going to have this room's going to start to be more full when you meet, and you're going to hear from service users and providers who are going to tell you what they think about that. So leadership means setting a path and sticking to that path. We need to plan long term. I've said 10, 20, 50-year plans. That starts with a 5-year financial plan and 5-year operational plan that is in direction of a longer term plan. And then follow the plan. It's one thing to draw it up and say this is great, but we need to follow it day after day. And when good ideas come up, we need to say, is this in the plan? And if it isn't, then we really need to, sometimes we need to say no to things. We need to focus our spending on local government responsibilities. It's hard for a local government because we're here, we're in this community, but a number of the things that we engage on are not our responsibility. They're the responsibility of senior government, whether it's housing or seniors or children, a number of these things. Some of them are in some way ours, and I don't mean to say any of those ones that I mentioned are not worthy causes, but when senior governments divest themselves of some of these services, we pick them up because we care and we're here. But it doesn't really, some of those things don't really belong here. So we need to be mindful when we're taking on responsibilities of other governments. Do we want to do that? And I would suggest that when you consider that, you say, this isn't ours, it's not our responsibility, but do we want to pick it up anyway because it's valuable? And if it is, we can do it. But we need to be mindful when we're stepping outside of our mandate. And again, the bottom bullet, we need to stick to our plan. So in terms of those three challenges I pointed out, a proposed solution, number one, lack of growth. I think we need to acknowledge that lack of growth is likely to continue going forward. And that's, that's heresy to say. I just spent the weekend doing visioning on the Charette project, and I'm as excited about where this community is going as the next person. But we haven't had growth for 30, 35 years here. So if you look backward at the trend, you got to really start asking yourself, is there going to be growth in the next 5 years? And if there is, terrific. But what are the indicators that there will be growth? And so do we budget and plan on growth and prosperity, new prosperity, or do we budget on conservatively and say things might look like they've looked the last little while? Live within our existing means. Living within our means is important to us, but that means our existing means, not our optimistic means. We shouldn't, in my mind, be planning spending based on growth that we hope will come or that we're working toward achieving. I'm more and more convinced that livability grows communities, and I know jobs is another piece of it. There's a number of pieces that grow communities. I think people live where they want to live, and if they can work there, that's even better. But more and more, I think people live in communities they want to live in, and if they have to work somewhere else, they will. I'm not saying we should turn our back on industry or turn on job growth. Those are all pieces of it. But we need to be mindful that if you talk to the new people who have come to this community, a lot of them didn't come here for work. A lot of them came here because this is where they want to be. So in the bottom lines there, my suggestion is that we target a modest tax increase, and my example is 3%. So if inflation is 1.5% to 2%, for example, if we increase taxes moderately above that, then and we spend moderately below that, then over the course of time, we're going to start to free up some money, and then commit that money to infrastructure. It sounds, Pat Deacon likes to say, if you say it fast, it sounds easy. And so this sounds really easy, right? Yeah, we'll just decrease our spending. So if we decrease our spending, especially if we do it over a long period of time, that means we're going to decrease our delivery of services. So then we're going to have to scale back, intelligently decide which services we provide to a lesser extent and which services we stop providing altogether. It's not an easy thing. So spending less than inflation means that we start to scale back services, a really hard discussion. Number two, on the infrastructure, we need to finalize a long-term infrastructure plan. We've done some really good work on water and sewer rates. Those rates we've accelerated the increase in those rates, as you know, and we're almost done there to where those funds are sustainable going forward. We'll be able to replace our infrastructure on water and sewer just with user fees, which is where we want to be. So over time, if we start to manage our operation in a way that frees up some money more and more as years come along, we'll be able to increase the pace of infrastructure renewal. Not just spending money in each year, but putting money back in the bank. We should be building up our capital reserve fund so that we can take better advantage of grants when they come along and be better positioned if some cataclysmic unplanned change does come along. It's just like your personal finances. If you don't have any money in the bank, you're really dependent on your next paycheck, and we need to have a little more money in the bank. As far as the industry, excuse me, I think we should accept that that industry as we've known it may change. I'm not saying it is going to change, but I think we should be prepared that it might change. And I also think that we shouldn't rush out and reduce industrial taxes. That probably is a dialogue that we need to have with our industrial operators, but I don't think it's the biggest challenge they face today. And I think because and the reason I say we shouldn't rush out and do that is we can use that. That's one of the things we have to our advantage right now is we have industrial taxpayers, and we should use those funds over the next few years to bridge the gap on infrastructure and rebuilding our capital reserve fund. I think we should continue to do everything we can to grow the community and the forest-based economy. And as you know, we're working very hard on that. And the last line, reduce city service delivery dependency on industrial taxes over time. So not necessarily infrastructure renewal, but service delivery. So all the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, we need to start thinking about where are areas where we can control our costs and maybe pull back our services. Some are going to be, some places we likely won't be able to make change. Those are all, again, hard decisions to make. So a couple slides, this is me editorializing. I wanted to talk about our services. We provide a really broad array of services to a high level. I'm really proud of the service we provide. And I know all the people who work for the city, and I'm sure council is proud of the services we provide in this small community. I think they're higher in many cases, the level of service, than other communities of our size. So if we're going to go down this path, we need to consider intelligently reducing some of those service levels. And in some cases, we might be able to discontinue a service or have somebody else provide it. And we should look at different ways to deliver the current services. But again, in bold, while we're doing that, having those conversations, we need to strongly resist taking on new services and obligations. And every time we have a public meeting, you're asked to take on new services and obligations. And they're all good ideas. So we need to make sure that while we're trying to get our finances repositioned so we can replace our infrastructure, that we can't be adding in new things as well. If we're making room in our budget for infrastructure, we can't be peeling that off for things that are attractive in the moment. That might be the hardest thing to do. I wanted to talk about our services and our employees. Our operations, the services that we provide and the way we provide them are a result, in my mind, of a long history of industrial tax prosperity and future optimism. And the situation that we have as far as our services we provide those are not the fault of our employees. Those are decisions that we have made as managers and elected officials. And because it's not the fault of our employees, the services we provide, I don't think we're going to resolve this situation by fighting with our employees. I think that a meaningful reduction in budget means a reduction over time in workforce costs, and it can only come from reducing those services. At the same time, we need to manage and modernize our procedures. And the last bullet, the cooperation of our unions, is critical. And again, this course of action, steady course of action over time, in my mind, would prevent us from having to do something large if we end up in a tax fall, if we lose a revenue source overnight, if you like. Taking change the course of action now would really help us avoid something really difficult down the road. And I wanted to talk about our services and our neighbors too. There's been a lot of dialogue about that. The services we provide and the way we provide them are the result of our decisions. People who sat in your chair before you and my chair before me, and you and me, we made those decisions. It's not the fault of our neighbors, and we were not going to resolve that by blaming our neighbors. So having said that, there might be opportunities to share services with our neighbors or do things differently. And that might involve asking the regional district to lead on service of provision to more than just the city. And we're already engaged in those conversations. But we can't start those conversations by, in my mind, we can't start those conversations by blaming the situation on the neighbors. When you're considering budget direction to us, I'd like you to consider taxation equity. So are we currently in a situation where the taxes are distributed correctly across different taxation groups? Residential, commercial, industrial. And if not, then tell us what needs to change. What would be equitable? What would be an equitable split between the various groups? And if we are in a situation where you think there's equity, then it might be time to consider raising taxes across the board at the same amount going forward. Those are things that you need to consider for when you give us direction. So just kind of to recap, true 5-year planning. So we want council to focus on 2021. We don't want you looking at 2017. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that in the process. But what we want is you to tell us, what does 2021 look like budget-wise and operations-wise? And then staff will go away and we'll roll up our sleeves and build an operational plan that gets us to your vision in 2021. And we'll come back to you with an operational and a financial plan that reflects that. And you'll have lots of opportunity to modify that and to kick the tires and build a budget and an operations plan that you want, and then you can adopt it. And then when you do, I'd like you to stay the course. And I'd like you to tell me that you want to stay the course, and then I'll keep reminding you. So next steps. You've already gone over the strategic plan, and it remains in draft form, but you've refreshed it. And I think you need to maybe touch it one more time before it becomes a public document, finalized. And then probably in early November, I think it'll be time for you to give us budget direction on what you want 2021 to look like. And then senior staff and myself will work on developing a draft budget that meets your direction, and we'll come back to you, and we can start to work together on finalizing the budget for 2017, 2021. And I think that's all of my slides. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll say again, I don't mean to say the sky's falling. It's not. I just think that we're in a situation where good leadership now will prevent us from a situation where we have to say, oh my gosh, the sky's falling. I'm happy to answer questions.
Councillor Minions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That presentation was just as grim this time as last time, so thank you. But important, and thank you for bringing it forward. I certainly agree with the concept. I agree that, you know, when good causes come forward, we need to ask them, you know, to go through the proper processes and what are they contributing, et cetera. I don't agree with formally, you know, agreeing that we're not going to have growth. I think we certainly should plan to not have growth, but I think at the same time, we should expect growth, maybe not bank on it. But I think that we are going to grow. I think we've also formally adopted a growth goal with our economic development department. So I think that's an important thing for us to work towards. That said, I do agree that we should be planning to not have growth and making our financial decisions based on that. What I'm curious about is how do we balance, you know, livability, which a huge part of livability and how we get there to be a livable community is investing in our community to make it a place that people will want to live and people will want to come, more people. How do we balance that with reductions in services and spending? Thank you. I'm not asking necessarily for specifics, but
I think
generally.
You know, obviously, I don't have the answer to that question. How do we suck and blow, right? We can't necessarily, but what I would suggest is that we plan or budget for the worst, if you like, and work and hope for the best. And council needs to be optimistic. You can't be doom and gloom leaders, right? We need to be optimistic about where we're going, and there's lots of good things going on in this community. What I'm suggesting is that we, in terms of the operations of the city, that we not budget based on growth that just isn't money that's not in the bank yet. That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, Councillor Paulson, then Councillor Sobey.
I'm going to take liberty here. I'm going to make 2 points. The one point that kind of is resonating here, and it's, you know, you threw up the 5 years with the 5.5% average. I remember the first year for new councillors, the Local Government Learning Academy, and sat in on a financial session there. And we have a tremendous amount of pressure to hold your tax increases to 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. But I do remember, and I can't remember the exact details of that chart that they showed, you can have 1.5% and 2.5% increases, but in the 4th, 5th, or 6th, or 7th year, you're going to pay the piper, and it's probably going to be 12, or there will be an adjustment. Yeah. And so I think we need to keep that in mind. And I'm really, really happy that you've brought the heavy industry scenario to us, and it's not to say that they're not going to be here or will be here, but as we go through this process, I think it's mindful to keep that in mind. And there's actually 2 communities in British Columbia right now that have suffered that. Merritt has lost their major industrial sawmill, which employs 1,000 people, or 250 people, and Quesnel is going through it. And Mr. Mayor, Quesnel is quite unique, and they're actually handling it in a unique way, and they've actually taken some projects. And on their tax bill, there is a 7.5% increase in one category, but that 7.5% is on their tax bill as a line item going to a specific project. It's not like going into general revenue. So when you sell that to somebody, like it could be sewer or water or whatever, and you say, look at this main line that has to be repaired, that appears as a line item during the length of that project. And people accept that. They understand it if there's nuts and bolts to it. So that's just my comment is, yeah, sooner or later you're going to pay the piper, and It's great to, I think, just think about what could happen if one of our major employers disappears.
I think, Councillor Paulson, you're exactly right that if you, and we've seen this before where we do 0-0 or whatever, and then we do 12. And it's because we haven't actually reduced our commitments. We've just run in a deficit mode. Yeah, we ran till we were out of breath, and then we had to take a deep breath, right? So if we're going to do this, and if we're going to do it well, we need to stay the course. And will we stay the course? I sure hope so. I'll support that course. It comes to council to stay the course or not. So I'm not talking about we'll just tighten our belt a little further. We've been tightening our belts so much. We've done all the low-hanging fruit things. If we want to make this kind of change in spending, we need to make changes in the services we provide. That, pure and simple. We can't magically provide the same services with less money, right? There might be that perception in the world that somehow we can just become more efficient overnight. That there's huge efficiencies to be gained that will somehow enable us to have all the things we enjoy now for less money. In my opinion, that's not true. So we need to, if we want to head down this course, we need to stop doing some things, and we need to stop doing some of the things to the extent that we do them.
Councillor Sauvé.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember having a meeting with the engineer department and wanted to talk to him and myself and Councillor McLennan about discussing about a predicament plan as into infrastructure for the next, forget 5 years, 25 years. And I think past councils and, you know, it came to the point that they lived on a budgetary reasoning over the fact that the industry is here. And I feel that we need to move away from that and to the fact to be how we can be self-sufficient. Now the public itself, you know, everybody's worried about taxes going up and so forth, but it takes you to realize when you're in government office to realize where these pennies are going to, and to be able to learn, and which is a hard thing for any type of civic politician to say no to its constituents on certain projects and so forth. And you know, it's all nice and great and brings the community together, but we got to keep in mind that we have a budget that we have to keep, and that 5-year plan dealing strictly with aging infrastructure has been always a goal for me, and I'm sure other councils to deal with. Doing the Band-Aid jobs, it's not working anymore. It's getting simple that the infrastructure, as per the last engineering report came out that we were 40 years behind. Well, we're going to be more than that behind next year and so forth if we keep on pushing it away. So I think option B obviously it's a good place to go and start investing. I don't believe, and if anybody's going to argue about tax hikes, it'll be me, but I don't believe you'll get any argument on any type of tax hikes if it comes to an investment to our community dealing with aging infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Alamani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I really appreciate you bringing this presentation forward, because I think it's something that the community needs to hear, and you know, it's a reality check that maybe we as council and past councils haven't heard before, and at least not publicly. Everybody knows that, you know, one day the mills or industry could disappear, as it has in other communities, and that's not to say it will, or you know, tomorrow or the next day or 10 years down the road, but it has to be something that we have to plan for. So I think it's really refreshing that you're bringing this forward and giving us the opportunity to have that conversation with the community. I think what we've heard in the past, I agree very much with what other councillors have said around, you know, bringing our costs in line with something more manageable, that we wouldn't have to necessarily rely on the industry. But I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that in past surveys and public meetings and all sorts of stuff, there's always been very strong support for the services that we provide in the community. So we need to level with our citizens and say, you know, if we want those services to continue, we will have to pay significantly more as residents and businesses to have that option, and that's something I think we should ask them in a very forthright manner, so that we can act on that as well. But in general, I think being able to plan for a long-term outlook rather than year after year, as has been the practice up till now, is certainly something we need to do. We have now we have an example in our sewer and water rates that we can make those difficult quick rises to bring us back up to a level that'll be more sustainable down the road, and that's what is missing for the rest of our infrastructure. I've always said that that's something that I think we need to try to address, and as Quesnel has demonstrated, if you are very upfront and honest with residents and tell them exactly what their funds will go to, they are much more likely to accept that hit. So hopefully that's somewhere we can go.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Alberni, there's more than one option here, right? So another option is we could raise taxes, force channel to specific use. We can do that too. My hope is that engaging here in a public way with council, we're also at the same time engaging the community, and that over the next 3 weeks or so, you're going to hear from the community. And this is the kind of input that you need. But before you can give us direction on the budget, I think you need to hear from the community. And so my hope today was to drop the bomb in the room, if you like, and say, here's one way we can approach this, and see what kind of input you get.
CAO, this council has been clear right from day one that we want to do our business in a different way. And we've been really consistent and showing what we want to do in terms of our exempt staff contracts, and all of that is about getting our obligations under control. And same token, we have said we want to engage in a process so that as a city we're not solely responsible for the maintenance of some of our non-core obligations, such as the museum. We need to figure out a way to get into line with other communities in the province. So I don't think you'll get any real challenges from this council in terms of heading in the direction that you're suggesting. But what I want to point out, not for you because you're well aware of this, and not for council, but for the public, that the way for us to answer a lot of these questions is working together with our staff. It's not imposing it on, it's working with them and saying, okay, well, what are the areas that we really can look at, and how can we look at them, and what are the impacts if we make these particular decisions? Because frankly, it's our staff that has to face this on a day-to-day basis. Yes, as a council, we make the decisions, but ultimately it's our staff that makes things happen. So that's how we get there.
Mr. Mayor, to echo your comments, if we're going to head down whatever path we head down, I think what's really critical in our future is the ability to develop partnerships and relationships, and to maintain those partnerships and relationships. And so I'd like to say in this public meeting that a longer term approach means that we can take care of all of our employees, if we can take care of all of our partners, we can take care of all of our service users. So people need to have a certain level of comfort that the things aren't going to change tomorrow, and they don't need to. The sky's not falling. But if we take a longer term approach to things, we can make changes as opportunities arise that are not hurtful. But that means too that one, we build that plan and we show the community this is our longer term plan, and then we stick to it, and we don't deviate. We maintain, we respect the relationships, we respect our partnerships. It's really critical that people will partner with us, and so we need to be mindful of that every step we take. So some of the things you mentioned, those things are in process, and they'll take, to reach the right conclusion, they'll take time to get to the conclusion that we want. Mm-hmm. So it takes patience and commitment and strong leadership.
So CAO, thank you so much for your presentation. I think we probably should get the Deputy City Clerk's presentation, and then we can have a motion to receive the verbal reports.
He'll bring better news. Yeah. And again, Mr. Mayor, I apologize if this sounds doom and gloom. I didn't want it to be that way. It's just one perspective.
It's an important perspective, and it goes really well with the the black suit. So thank you.
Thank you.
I thought I saw some horns sticking out when I first stepped out there, so.
Hey, Jake, bring us the good news now.
Always. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight does kick off our 2017 budget process, and not sure if it feels like a celebratory moment right now, but certainly it's a milestone, and I'll just not press that button to drop the balloons down from the ceiling quite yet. The city's annual budget process does take place over the course of several months, and we are guided, of course, by provincial legislation that requires us to adopt a 5-year plan by May the 15th each year. So this year we're starting a little bit early by intention, and we're also making a few modifications that I want to bring to your attention and also to the public's. So the first of these changes is a truncating or condensing of our budget, departmental budget presentations. As you recall, Council and the public receive presentations from each one of our departments and external agencies, 17 in total, typically. And typically that takes 3 to 5 council meetings in which you're sitting and listening to these presentations. Very detailed, very informative. However, we're going to try and kind of just flip this on its head a little bit and focus that time on council discussing, posing questions, and really engaging in debate with staff around some of these departmental presentations. So our CAO is going to be doing a comprehensive presentation this year on all departmental budgets, and you will receive that once you provide direction to council, and also once you receive then a draft budget proposal. So we're going to condense the process. We're also going to incorporate some electronic participation into our public budget form. So each year we also have a public budget meeting in which we invite the public out to receive information about the budget and also provide input. This time we're going to try and add an e-town hall format to that, in which then people can participate online or in other methods in addition to being there, but basically in person. So it's hoped that this new format will provide greater community involvement by diversifying the methods in which the public can participate and where they can participate from. Many of us are engaged on social media. We may be at home and maybe don't want to come out to that meeting, but we can certainly pose our feedback or our question to council through that method. Finally, tomorrow we're going to be launching a new and enhanced public budget survey. And certainly, so I want to bring some strong attention to this, and Davina can actually pull this up for you to see as well. This new interactive budget tool is going to allow residents to tailor the consultation to their specific property tax bill. So we want the public to have their say, and so we've provided basically some instructions on how to go through the process. And one of the first things you're going to notice, if we scroll down a little further, is you can then enter in your property assessment value, and so that will tailor all the information to your specific home. So I think we all recognize that when we use budget figures like a few $1 million for this service or a few $100,000 for that service, it's hard to necessarily personalize that. What does that mean to me as a resident? This process here will allow you to see exactly how much you pay for the specific services, whether it be fire, police, economic development, or others. So you'll be able to see how much you're paying, and you'll also then get to determine if you'd like to pay more or less, and thereby enhance or decrease that service. So if you scroll down a little further, each of our services is profiled with some information that's available on it. We've got links to our website and everything, and then you'll see that scale on the right-hand side. And so you'll be able to scale up or down in increments of about 5% to a maximum of 30%. And that way then you can sort of express how you would like to see your budget for the city. So this is a significant departure from previous surveys, which are very much focused on the average or representative home. And again, like I said, on big, broad budget figures around some of our specific services. So we're going to open this up tomorrow morning. We're going to run it for approximately 2 weeks. We've had tremendous engagement from the public on our previous surveys, and we're hoping to get the same this year. So strongly encourage you to speak with as many people as you can and get them to participate. At the very bottom of the survey, we do ask for some basic contact information. It's not to collect information for folks other than to basically send them an email if they wish to provide the results and show how their results compared to others that have completed the survey. So, opens up tomorrow morning, runs till November the 8th. It's you can access the survey, or will be able to, at portalberni.ca/budget. And we really hope that there's a strong response from the community. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Do you have some sense of the dates that we're going to be dealing with over the next few months?
So broadly, we're going to be looking to receive direction from council on the 14th of November, and then it's a matter of sort of how long that takes for staff to come back with the first initial draft proposal. I would expect we'd be doing some sort of public forum, e-town hall meeting in early to mid-January, in that range. But again, we want to first wait till we get some of these things flushed out first.
And we're going to be working council and managers before that?
That's correct, yeah. So like I said, when we condense that budget process, we're going to try and then focus that time then around council, meeting in public, and working with senior management around some of the specifics of the budget.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I think that it would be far more effective if council gave us direction, if staff first had an opportunity to work as staff on a draft, very broad draft budget in terms of, you know, what your direction is, here's the changes that may or may not be involved. And then certainly there'd be opportunities for one or more meetings where we sit around a table, where council and staff sit around a table and start to go through some of those changes. But first, staff would need to, based on your input, would need to do a little bit of work to say, well, what does that input look like operationally? And that's not something I don't think that at that first touch of the budget, I don't think council would have the familiarity with the operations. But certainly there is a round table in our future.
Okay, Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I think it's a great idea to get started now and keep going. I don't think it's, in my personal opinion at least, it's necessary to do everything all at once and we start cramming early instead of cramming late, because it just wears everybody out. And I think it's probably something we should start tomorrow, as you're saying, you're starting tomorrow, and start it out into a 12-month process. That, yeah, we got a deadline in whenever it is, but April, whatever, but then the next budget, then we've got 12 months to get to the next one. And if we can see where we are and some system of monitoring how we're doing as we go, other than just numbers that we spent that much, yeah, okay. But you've done a very good job, I think, of coming up with that concept of fiddling around with your taxes. I know I'm going to put mine down to $1 and see where that goes, but other than that, I think that's
30%.
good. And make a drawn out and a proper program. I think we may find that we're going to have to inject a bit of cash in some parts of the city's operations in the first year, and maybe not, just to make it smooth and that we can carry on for the rest of the time doing what's been suggested.
Thank you. Councillor Sauvé.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add it for those little silent majorities that are not techies and don't have a computer, if it actually happens in Port Alberni, but there is a lot of people. Just open up and get them to contact their local councillors or mayor or go through the city, and it's important to voice their opinions and all that. I'm just afraid that they see this tool is a great tool. It'll grab a big chunk of the community, but there's no other big chunk that wants to speak out. Just get a hold of your local councillor or mayor and pass on your concerns for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Sauvé, thank you for bringing that forward. Certainly, we have made printed copies, or will be making printed copies available. That'll be you can pick them up at Echo Center or at City Hall, fill them out, bring them back, submit them, and they will be included with this. So, thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you. A motion to receive the verbal reports would be in order.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Are we okay? All right. We could call a recess. You're all right. Okay.